The Fintech Association of Nigeria has part of its mandate to connect, accelerate and advocate for the development of the fintech ecosystem in the country, hosted its Social Meet 6.0. It brought together key stakeholders in the industry, from lawyers, fintechs, financial market players, bankers to regulators, and discussed the theme Fintechs and Regulation. The president of the Fintech Association of Nigeria, Dr. Segun Aino, gave the opening remarks at the event.
I want to say that the regulators, the financial services industry, not only the central bank, but even the SEC, National Insurance Commission, PENCOM, and so on, are all very committed towards digital, towards ensuring they have appropriate regulatory framework that will ensure that people in the fintech space thrive for the benefit of the economy. Because regulation is very important in a country like ours. In the developed world, regulation may not really be an issue today. If you have read the UK fintech census of 2019, and they engaged with about 224 fintech operators of fintech community, fintech entities, asking about their key pain points. The 53% of the respondents mentioned that attracting the necessary talents was their number one pain point. Number two pain point was about customer acquisition, while number three pain point was about, I think attracting for funding or something like that. Whereas in Nigeria, when EFINA did the same thing in December 2018, the EFINA FinTech report, the number one pain point for fintech operators in Nigeria was regulation. Whereas in the UK, regulation was number 8. About only 11% of respondents. So that means at the state that we are, we still have a lot of things to do in terms of regulation, regulatory clarity, letting the operators know exactly what is happening.
Tolulokpe Omoleye Oshindero, the Senior Associate of Udo Udoma and Bello Osage Chambers, presented an overview of the regulatory scope of the CBN on fintech activities on behalf of Mr. Sam Okojiri, the Chief Fintech Officer and Director, Payment Systems.
Challenges that I think the CBN is facing is, one would be technology is changing, it's changing rapidly. They also are trying to understand some of these things, and it's something that they would need to be agile with. There's companies operating without licenses. There's difficulty in meeting licensing requirements for some of the startups, which is a real issue because, for example, some of the licenses require that you have a shareholder fund of 2 billion naira. One other thing is people operating beyond the scope of their license. So one useful thing is that it's already explained that if the category of license that you have doesn't cover a particular activity, you could apply to get an extra approval for you to do that. But note that, if that approval is something that requires a separate shareholder fund, you will need to upgrade your shareholder funds or shareholder capital. There's a lack of understanding of regulations, which is why forums like this are also useful because you're able to share knowledge, exchange information with maybe people that are in the same line of business or people that have existing license as what you want to get, and they might not just be able to clarify a few things for you.
The founder and CEO of Kuda Nigeria's first licensed mobile bank gave a brief presentation on how it has been enabling digital financial services in the country.
Now, the great thing about the Kudo credit product is it actually really understands you as a customer. So because of all the different things we do, like categorization, we know exactly what you're spending on. Not just the fact that you're spending and you have like 10K, 20K left in your account, but we know most of the time you spend money on entertainment. Or if you're a saver, we know how disciplined you are as a saver. So all of these things we're able to factor into our credit analysis, which, basically helps us to give you the best possible credit that's meant for you. So it's completely personalized. And what works for one customer definitely doesn't necessarily work for another customer. So it's real personalized credit, and it's just available to you. You don't have to fill any forms. Sometimes it would even prompt you when you're going sort of below your usual residual value. It will tell you, oh, maybe you need a little bit of cash just to top up until the next inflow comes. So all of that is built into the app.
It featured a robust panel session that discussed the critical issues around fintechs and regulation.
These licenses have sort of evolved over time, because the CBN saw that there was activity in the payment space, and this company was doing this. They designated a license for that activity, and after a while, they saw that people were developing apps for third-party processing, developing solutions for payments, and they weren't doing like the old works. Then they came up with another license for that. I think because of the way things have changed, I would say that that's partly responsible for why we have like different categories of the licenses. And it's a valid point that you've raised. Is there a way that we can converge some of these licenses so that if you have one, you wouldn't need to apply for 2 or 3 other licenses? And it's a feedback that I think the CBN should take.
One of the things that personally I think hasn't been done properly is actually to call the people that are doing these different types of businesses to the table, so those are the guys that really understand what is happening now, what they plan to do in the future. So the CBN can actually help by also having that insight to be able to anticipate what is coming like in the future, not necessarily playing a reactive game. Every time there's like a new thing, there has to be a new policy. And it actually really hinders innovation because, you feel you've kind of covered all your bases, and then all of a sudden there's a new policy and you spend like 2 years, hungry, no food, coming up with this solution, and with just one green pen, sometimes it's a red pen, there's a decision that you actually can't operate anymore. Even though there was nothing stopping you from operating in that particular field before. So it needs to be a collaborative effort. I think this association can actually help with that by bringing all the players and the regulators to the table more often, especially, during those times when those decisions are being made, not when, the cameras are there and PR and paparazzi, but when the decisions are actually being made, I think it would really, really work and go a long way.
As an association, we're driven by 3 objectives. The first one is connect, which is why we're here, to bring everybody within this space together. We can network or share ideas. The other one is to accelerate, which is improving technological growth. The last one is advocate, which means to ensure there's progressive regulatory reforms and continuous government support. And that's partly also why we were here and why we wanted CBN to be here, to interact with the operators, understand the issue of operators, and we'll do this as often as we can. Now, we've had various interactions with the regulators on how we can deal with this issue of licensing, speed up the process, and part of the feedback is the fact that there are always incomplete documentation, and when they get back to people, it takes them another 3-4 months to get back to them, and of course the bureaucracy in there starts all over again. So what should take 4-5 months could take a year plus because of all these delays. So that's part of why this interaction is important, that you can meet with the regulators, understand what the issues are. For example, if you're applying for a license, your memorandum and article of association must speak to that particular product. It cannot be general. Now, if you don't know that, you will have submitted maybe a general MEMAT and it comes back to you. So, but we are making efforts as an association to ensure that we can encourage this interaction, and whether we like it or not, it's not just a Nigerian problem. All over the world, technology moves faster than regulators. They're always doing catch-up. So but how to bring them on board, and we can ensure that they understand where the operators are coming from as fast as possible. I think it's critical. We're working towards that, but it's not microwave. I mean, we all should understand that it's a marathon, but we'll try our best in bridging that gap.
The CBN had found itself in a position where they were more or less reacting to what was happening in the system. I'm not holding brief for them, but it wasn't concerted. It wasn't like it was being thought together as an idea. Each of these licenses came out of their zone, which is why we then have a situation where some are overlapping, or you could almost not distinguish between what is available under one, unlike the other. Now, there is also the other angle to this, and I must say, the association, we've had a lot of engagement with the CBN on this point. In fact, we had a meeting with the Deputy Governor, and we're discussing a single licensing framework, for fintechs to address some of these gaps. Unfortunately, we think some of the reaction to that engagement is the payment system banks, which didn't still address some of our concerns, and then came with its own challenges for even some of the members of the association. And we've continued to engage with the CBN on this point. But we should realize that there is also some form of tough war or some form of concern or unwillingness on the part of the CBN to also ruffle the feathers of banks. We must say that, and we've tried to speak to the CBN about trying to manage the various interests in ensuring that each stakeholder is able to have some form of level playing ground, without being at a disadvantage. Mrs. Lawson rightly mentioned the fact that a lot of microfinance banks can actually do what some of these licenses we are talking about. There's the perspective also that a lot of fintech companies cannot actually meet the requirement for setting up microfinance banks. So it's almost like the CBN trying to achieve some win-win situation, which doesn't necessarily then take us to where we want, has then created some kind of ambiguity around the licensing framework and what can or cannot be done by a particular finance institution.
Highlights of the event was the induction of new members into the Fintech Association of Nigeria and presentation of awards to professional members. Dr. Babatunde Obrima, Chief Operating Officer of Fintech Association of Nigeria, speak further on the event.
This session was actually for members to meet with regulators to discuss the issues that affect licensing. And I think some of the issues a lot of issues have come up which we will discuss with the regulators that the operators need them to look at. They don't want the regulators to be reactive. They want them also to be proactive in terms of technological development and new happenings within the fintech space across the globe. In terms of the year, I think this year has been exciting for the fintech industry. With $400 million coming into this space, we just it can't be better. And I think next year is going to get better too. Technology is always changing. Things are always happening. And I think that the Nigerian space is ready for this. People are ready. The creativity here is enormous. The enabling environment that supports that creativity. I hope that in 2020 we'll be able to look at how we can develop local funding that will be patient capital to support the fintech space.
The Fintech Social Meet 6.0 discourse brings to the fore a critical area that has to be addressed for the Nigerian fintech ecosystem to thrive, which is regulations. With regulatory clarity, Nigeria will continue to see expansion and increase investment into its fintech industry.